Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I hope everyone is doing okay today. It's 2:15 on a Monday. Trying to get over the hump. Well, we're beyond the hump at this point. It's actually just beginning the week, just beginning the long haul. All right, channel sound is good. Guys, I want to thank everybody who helped support the channel. If you enjoy the content, you can always feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support either through Patreon or Super Cash. I know I've been spending a lot of time across the pond today, and I'm going back across the pond because there are events that are taking place across the pond that I think we need to be wary of. I know you may say, as an American, why do I care about this? I don't know how to answer that. I don't know how to answer why I care about it. I care about it because it's news and it's information. It's something that's taking place right now that's affecting, or that will affect us. I mean, whether or not the British government implodes or not will, to some degree, affect us. However minute, however small, it will affect us. And I suspect that impact is going to be larger than small. Regardless of this point, Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn have just, maybe a few hours ago, finished sparring. Now, this is Theresa May facing an angry parliament, a parliament of Brexiteers and people who are unhappy with what she's delivered. Beano. Not the stuff that prevents gas. This is somewhat worse. This is essentially locking you as a vassal state of a European Union, where you don't get the benefit of the vote, while at the same token being beholden to everything that takes place that the European Union does. Meaning, if the European Union changes some kind of, let's say, legislation or changes some kind of regulation, and if Britain wants to maintain regulatory alignment, it will also have to change that particular regulation. If the British government wants to change a regulation, that regulation, if it runs afoul of regulatory alignment, it will lose access to the single market. I'm trying to get across the severity of what is taking place from the standpoint of Britain and its economy going forward. And that's assuming that the European Union accepts this in any measure. They may discount it out of hand, considering that they've already said no to the fanciful thinking that she's come up with prior. Also, let's not forget how we got here. The Tories had a majority in Parliament. Theresa May calls a snaps election because she thinks that she can break the back of Jeremy Corbyn. We're going to break the back of Labour. Fair enough. You're going to break the back of Labour. Great. Well, that didn't happen. And not only didn't that happen, Jeremy Corbyn, who was ridiculed, reviled, talked about, laughed at, joked. They talked about his clothing. They talked about his potential of never being prime minister, never even being close to the prime minister. He'd be lucky if he could smell the dispatch box from where he was standing. They don't say that these days. They say something else these days. These days they're terrified because they know that if an election was held today, the guy who they revile, the guy who they say didn't have a chance, the guy who they say was no way would ever reach the prime ministership, is sitting pretty, attacking the prime minister, strutting like a peacock. No, he's not the prime minister, but the prime minister lost her majority in that snap election. And not just lost her majority, she had to sign up with the DUP, essentially a fringe group for Northern Ireland, in order to maintain her prime ministership. People may not remember this, but that was somewhat frowned upon until the prime minister had to do it in order to maintain her government. And look at where we are now. A prime minister that's losing, secretary of Brexit, foreign secretary, just fell away within 2 days. The agreement that she put up that says she said that all of these people were going to sign on to, people dropped off like flies. I think 3 people have dropped off. And now she's facing the parliament with this level of failure and chaos at her coattails. She's looking Parliament in the eye. Let's take a listen to what Parliament has to say about this. So this is Theresa May. This was an amazing I imagine that Theresa May gave this speech assuming that Boris Johnson will still be sitting there and assuming David Davis will still be sitting there. I don't think she thought that these people would resign on her this quickly, this dramatically, at the 9th or 11th hour. But they did. Meaning that what she's pushing through has lost some degree of legitimacy from the standpoint of real, full-throated, top-of-their-lungs Brexiteers. She's going to push it through nonetheless. She may have a vote for her leadership after something like this, but we will see. This is why I'm covering this story in Britain, because the story is developing and it's absolutely fascinating what's taking place. So this is Theresa May facing down Parliament after the embarrassment and the indignity of losing 3 secretaries. Do you think?
Mr. Speaker, I am sure the House will join me in sending our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Dawn Sturgis, who passed away last night. The police and security services are working urgently to establish the full facts in what is now a murder investigation. I want to pay tribute to the dedication of staff at Salisbury District Hospital for their tireless work in responding to this appalling crime. Our thoughts are also with the people of Salisbury and Amesbury, and my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will make a statement shortly, including on the support we will continue to provide to the local community throughout this difficult time. Turning to Brexit, Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to my right honourable friends, the members for Halton Price and Howden, and Uxbridge and South Ruislip for their work over the last 2 years. We do not agree about the best way of delivering our shared commitment to honour the result of the referendum, but I want to recognise the work of the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, for the work he did to establish a new department and steer through Parliament some of the most important legislation for generations. And similarly to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order! There's a very unseemly atmosphere.
Order. They're laughing. They're laughing. Is she unaware? She knows that, and mind you, I know she's saying, I want to thank him for the work and everything else, and I would imagine this is somewhat of a bitter pill to swallow if your name is Theresa May. I mean, ultimately, you're saying, thank you for the work that you've done on this, even though he resigned in this dramatic way, sending the resignation letter and everything else to the news organizations. And beyond sending the resignation letter, she's saying, I want to thank him for the work that he's done on this, for a deal that he doesn't believe in. For a deal he doesn't believe in, it says a complete fraud. Let's keep going, because I played his clip this morning where he was talking about this, and the words I think he used, if I'm not mistaken, was fraud. It is a fraud. Your lips curl a particular bit when you say it. Fraud. It's a fraud. Let her keep going. Let her keep going.
I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. That the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting a global Britain to the world as we leave the European Union. And I'm also pleased to welcome my honourable friend, the member for Esher and Walton, as the new Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Mr. Speaker, on Friday at Chequers, the Cabinet agreed a comprehensive and ambitious proposal that provides a responsible and credible basis for progressing negotiations with the EU towards a new relationship after we leave on the 29th of March next year.
I don't mean to be picky here, but agreed is a little strong, right? I mean, we're using agreed from the standpoint of a magnificent amount of flexibility in that word. Agreed. You've had 3 ministers resign. You had one guy resign this morning, Boris Johnson, in this dramatic display where he was so ashamed of it, called it polishing a turd, tried to work himself up to defend it, and then just broke down in shame and walked away. They found him lurching out of number 10. Let's let her finish the speech. I don't mean to interrupt the speech, but the way people use political language always trips me out because there's a certain amount of unreality to what she's saying, especially when everybody knows reality. Everybody knows that there's not an agreement on this. Everybody knows it. The Brexiteers are calling for your head. They're calling you a traitor and a turncoat. They're saying that you took a knife and you shoved it in the back of Britain. That's what they're saying. Now you're telling me that there's some level of consensus on this. Perhaps I'm misunderstanding this, but I'm going to hear you out. Let's start it from the beginning because I don't want to continuously interrupt her. I want her to make a point. And I'm going to let Corbyn make his point. There's just a lot of political jargon that's being thrown around, and an argument can be made that to some degree, the flexibility of a word only goes so far. Let's take her back and let's let her restart this, at least to a point. There we go. That's a good point.
We do not agree about the best way of delivering our shared commitment to honour the result of the referendum, but I want to recognise the work of the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, for the work he did to establish a new department and steer through Parliament some of the most important legislation for generations. And similarly, to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order! A very unseemly atmosphere. I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you. That the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting a global Britain to the world as we leave the European Union. And I'm also pleased to welcome my honourable friend, the member for Esher and Walton, as the new Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Mr. Speaker, on Friday at Chequers, the Cabinet agreed a comprehensive and ambitious proposal that provides a responsible and credible basis for progressing negotiations with the EU towards a new relationship after we leave on the 29th of March next year. It is a proposal that will take back control of our borders, our money and our laws. But do so in a way that protects jobs, allows us to strike new trade deals through an independent trade policy, and keeps our people safe and our union together. Before I set out the details of this proposal, I want to start by explaining why we are putting it forward. The negotiations so far have settled virtually all of the withdrawal agreement, and we've agreed an implementation period which will provide businesses and governments the time to prepare for our future relationship with the EU. But on the nature of that future relationship, the two models that are on offer from the EU are simply not acceptable. First, there is what is provided for in the European Council's guidelines from March this year. This amounts to a standard free trade agreement for Great Britain, with Northern Ireland carved off in the EU's customs union and parts of the single market, separated through a border in the Irish Sea from the UK's own internal market. No Prime Minister of our United Kingdom could ever accept this. It would be a profound betrayal of our precious union. And while I know some might propose instead a free trade agreement for the UK as a whole, this is not on the table because it would not allow us to meet our commitments under the Belfast Agreement that there should be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Secondly, there is what some people say is on offer from the EU, a model that is effectively membership of the European Economic Area, but going further in some places and remaining in the customs union for the whole of the UK. This would mean continued free movement, continued payment of vast sums every year to the EU for market access, a continued obligation to follow the vast bulk of EU law, no independent trade policy, with no ability to strike our own trade deals around the world. I firmly believe this would not honour the referendum result. So if the EU continues on this course, there is a serious risk it could lead to no deal. And this would most likely be a disorderly no deal, for without an agreement on our future relationship, I cannot see that this Parliament would approve the withdrawal agreement with the Northern Ireland Protocol and financial commitments, and without these commitments, the EU wouldn't sign a withdrawal agreement. Mr. Speaker, a responsible government must prepare for a range of potential outcomes, including the possibility of no deal. including the possibility of no deal. And given the short period remaining before the conclusion of negotiations, the Cabinet agreed on Friday that these preparations should be stepped up.
Now, you're going to hear me give kind words to Theresa May here, so brace yourself. This actually may be good politics. If you had, let's say, a long time for people to dither and come up with ideas for Brexit, she knows that she has half of her cabinet, or for the most part, is Remain. She has the other half that is Brexit, or less, a little bit less than a half as Brexit. How on earth do you get these two to come to any resolution when they have a long period of time that just bump heads constantly, never really going anywhere, never really making any debate or changing anybody's minds? Put pressure on them. Heat it up. Get them closer to the time where something needs to take place, meaning you're forcing them into a pressure cooker situation. It's like, there's a bomb on the bus. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Fuck it, I'll sign. Now, that's I can't think of anything else that Theresa May be doing here. Saying she's delayed this for God knows how long, playing both sides, kind of not really showing her hand into the last killing blow where she finally shows her hand and it's a dagger that she stabs into the back of Brexiteers. I think she's pushing them to a pressure cooker situation. There's a bomb on the bus. There's a bomb on the bus. It's called Brexit. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Now, here's the other catch to this. Look, first, I don't think they're going to be able to take her out of her seat. I don't know. I don't live there. It doesn't seem like it. I don't necessarily know who else is going to want that job. And it doesn't seem like the Remainers have enough votes in order to rip her out of her seat. It may be good politics. It might be good politics. So let's let her finish.
But at the same time, we should recognise that such a disorderly no deal would have profound consequences for both.
One last thing, the no deal thing. She's right about that also. There's no government on earth with good sense that is going to go to a situation like that when they're not going to know the answer at the end. Meaning, the worst case scenario to take place, this is what we do. Some plan, it may be a horrible plan, it may be sitting in a corner and chewing bubblegum, but it's a plan, it's something. Do you remember when Greece had the referendum? It was the Grexit was the biggest thing. Grexit. Greece is going to leave the European Union. They're going to be the first one to leave the European Union. Oh my God, what's going to happen when Greece leaves the European Union? The referendum, this amazing show of solidarity and oneness of the Greek public, and this defiant, triumphant scream. You know, somebody lifts somebody up on their shoulder and their arms raised. No! Our referendum says, no, we're not going to take any more money. We're backing our government. European Union can go fuck yourself. It was a beautiful thing to watch. That lasted all of a day. After which the banks were shut down and all those people were brought to heel. The government crashed. And the rest is history. If I'm not mistaken, they have a right-wing government leading Greece now. Grexit had to have been considered. If you're going to have a referendum like that and you don't know what you're going to do if the government turns you down, from my understanding, he bet all of his political capital on that referendum, thinking that that referendum was going to somehow change the minds of Brussels. It did not. She has to have it in mind of what happens if there is no deal. Because I got to be honest, the fanciful deal that she's putting out now is probably going to be shot down. What happens? What's the compromise? She's already has a soft jello pudding Brexit. What else can she compromise? Let's hear her. But I guess my point is that actually may be good politics from the standpoint of trying to get her cabinet all aboard, or trying to get her party all aboard to back her for this particular jello Brexit, or Hello, Jello pudding Brexit.
Both the UK and the EU, and I believe that the UK deserves better. So the Cabinet agreed that we need to present the EU with a new model, evolving the position that I had set out in my Mansion House speech, so that we can accelerate negotiations over the summer, secure that new relationship in the autumn, pass the withdrawal and implementation bill and leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
I'm going to show Jeremy Corbyn's. But for the moment, I want to talk about political pressure. When Bernie Sanders was running in a race, I know some people was like, oh, Bernie Sanders was threatened or somebody beat Bernie Sanders up. I don't think anybody beat Bernie Sanders up. I don't think anybody had to do it. I think ultimately you have in a political process political pressure. There are people who you work with every day. There are people who you see every day. There are people who you talk to. There's the media circulating. It's a world, and they inhabit that world. And the people who they interact with are the people who have the most influence on them in that world. That's the most natural thing in the world. Bernie Sanders was part of that world. Just like many of the other people who gave their vote to the Clintons was part of that world. The political pressure is built into the world to which they exist. Theresa May doing this is to some degree exerting a certain amount of political pressure on the people who are involved in the process. You are in a historic negotiation. We need you to get this done. You need to put your political ideas aside from this idea of an esoteric Brexit to what is this going to mean in physical matter reality, real world terms, and we need you to make a deal about it, not conjecture. Meaning the people who are under her now are actually put under a time clock, a ticking time clock. They had more time on their clock before. They have much less time on that now. And it seems like she's trying to step up the pace of events. Mind you, it's been, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years. It doesn't seem like we've gotten that far in those 2 years. But again, perhaps she's putting a ticking time clock over their heads. Let's take a look at Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn! Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of this statement and to share her condolences to the friends and family of Dawn Sturgis. We're over 2 years on from the referendum. 2 years of sound bites, indecision and cabinet infighting. Culminating in a series of wasted opportunities, with more and more people losing faith that this government is capable of delivering a good Brexit deal, and that is just within her own cabinet. 2 years on from the referendum, 16 months on from Article 50 being triggered, it's only this weekend that the cabinet managed to agree a negotiating position among itself. And that illusion lasted 48 hours. There are now only a few months left until these negotiations are supposed to conclude. We have a crisis in government, 2 Secretaries of State have resigned, and still we're no clearer on what future relationship with our nearest neighbours and biggest partners will look like. Workers and businesses deserve better than this. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, this government is not capable of securing a deal to protect the economy, jobs and living standards. It is clear this government cannot secure a good deal for Britain. On Friday, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was so proud of her Brexit deal, she wrote to her MPs to declare collective cabinet responsibility is now fully restored.
You heard the woman scream from the background. Yeah, how's that going? How's that collective responsibility thing going? So, from my understanding, collective responsibility is kind of essentially everyone is on the same page with the Prime Minister. Prime Minister says X, everybody on the cabinet, when polled, says X. Everybody is on the same page. None of that Boris Johnson running around saying that the Prime Minister should be more like Trump. That's why it's funny. Because she says everybody's on the same page, and then everybody, like 3 people resign. let's keep going.
While the Environment Secretary added his own words and said, one of the things about this compromise is that it unites the Cabinet. The Chequers Compromise took 2 years to reach and just 2 days to unravel. Mr. Speaker, how can anyone have faith in the Prime Minister getting a good deal with 27 European Union governments when she can't even broker a deal within her own cabinet? To be fair, and I want to be fair to the former Brexit Secretary and the former Foreign Secretary, I think they would have resigned on the spot on Friday. But they were faced with a very long walk, no phone, and due to government cuts, no bus service either.
Those guys don't find that funny in the least. Look at those faces, those stone faces. I think he wants to laugh, but he's too demoralized and ashamed by all of this. Look, what Jeremy Corbyn is talking about here, the Prime Minister took their phones, and it was said that if you wanted a ride back, it was going to be a cab ride in order to get back to wherever you were going to in town. It was hilarious, actually. Let's let Corbyn finish. All right, let's let Corbyn finish.
So, I think they were probably wise to hang on for a couple of days so they can get a lift home in a government car. I also, Mr. Speaker, want to congratulate the honourable member for Esher and Walton on his appointment as the Secretary of State. He now becomes our chief negotiator on an issue that could not be more important or more urgent. But this new Secretary of State is on record as wanting to tear up people's rights. He said, and I quote, "I don't support the Human Rights Act. Leaving the European Union would present enormous opportunities to ease the regulatory burden on employers." And he is the one negotiating, apparently on behalf of this government in Europe. Mr. Speaker, this...
By the way, this is Labour's biggest fear. In Britain, the arguments that Jeremy Corbyn is making here, this is Labour's biggest fear. That the European Union has better, you can say better rights or better policies and regulations, especially in regards to workers and environmental laws. Corbyn doesn't necessarily want Britain to lose those particular protections, especially under a Tory government. So his argument and his complaint here to some degree has to do with the person who you put in is going to be horrendous for these issues. And for any of the regulations that we get rid of, what we supplant them with may be worse. That's his argument. Let's let him keep going with this argument, because I think he's right.
This mess is all of the Prime Minister's own making. For too long, she spent more time negotiating the divisions in her party than she is putting any focus on the needs of our economy. The Prime Minister postured with red line after red line, and now, as reality bites, she's backsliding on every one of them. We were also given commitments that this government would achieve the exact same benefits and free and frictionless trade with the EU. Now those red lines are fading. And the team the Prime Minister appointed to secure this deal for our country have jumped the sinking ship. Far from strong and stable, there are ministers overboard and the ship is listing, all at the worst possible time. Mr. Speaker, if we look at the Prime Minister's proposals for the long-delayed White Paper, this is not a comprehensive plan for jobs in Britain and the economy the people of this country deserve. These proposals stop well short of a comprehensive customs union, something trade unions and manufacturers have been demanding. Instead, they float a complex plan that has already been derided by her own cabinet members as bureaucratic and unwieldy. The agreement contains no plan to protect our service industry, no plan to prevent a hard border in Northern Ireland, and also put forward the idea of regulatory flexibility, which we all know, Mr. Speaker, regulatory flexibility is a code for deregulation of our economy. The government's proposals will lead to British workplace rights, consumer rights, food safety standards and environmental protections falling behind EU standards over time.
He's right. The Tories will do it. And the wet dream that they have of being some kind of trade deal with the United States, the Tories will do it. They're going to drop each and every regulation that they can drop. They don't believe in that stuff. To them, this stuff is profits matter far more than human beings. If they get the opportunity to gut regulations, they're going to gut regulations. If they get the opportunity to privatize the NHS, they're going to privatize the NHS. If they get the opportunity to do it, they're going to do it. Each little nibble that they can get their hands on, they're going to take that nibble and they're going to chip away at it. I'm telling you, you can see it in the United States. We are your darker brother. I don't. No pun intended.
And none of this has even been tested in negotiations. The Chequers Agreement now stands as a shattered truce, a sticking plaster over the cavernous cracks in this government. The future of jobs and investment are now at stake. Those jobs and that investment are not a subplot in the Tory party's civil war. And at such a crucial time for our country, in these vital negotiations, we need a government that is capable of governing and negotiating for Britain. For the good of this country and its people, the government needs to get its act together and do it quickly. And if it can't, make way for those who can.
I like Corbyn. I like Corbyn a lot. And that was a good line. The subplot. Essentially, business is not a subplot. And the wild part about this is you have Labour now talking about business, where the Tories were talking about fuck business. What amazing turnabout. Thing is, Jeremy Corbyn cares about those jobs because he's tethered to the labor unions who care about those jobs. So he is going to push for those jobs as assiduously, if not more so, than the Tories, because the people he interact with are going to be hurt more. Let's see. The uptime clock is ticking on May. She is basically a pinata at this point. Yeah, they're going to hit her garden. Pet hacker, it would be thank Ja. Thank Ja. Yeah, that was a great closing. Make way. Corbyn shows how trash Miliband was. Streamed laps. Baltazar, you're right, man. Miliband was horrendous. Miliband was utterly horrendous. And, you know, you hear, what's his name? What is his name? War criminal. Tony Blair. Tony Blair saying that Labour has been captured by the far left. No. Labour is supposed to be far left. It's supposed to be a Labour party. Not New Labour, what Tony Blair was. Tony Blair was something else. He was an aberration. Jackinson 85. So random. Nobody who no one was aware of resigned to get some desperate attention. You think Boris Johnson jumped ship just to get attention? Boris Johnson gets attention everywhere he goes. London loves Bernie. Nigel Farage went on the radio this evening and announced that unless Brexit is back on track by March 2019, he will seriously reconsider running for leader of UKIP again. Are you serious? Wow. Because I think he knows what's taking place. His Brexit is slipping away from him. Nigel Farage have worked like a maniac for this Brexit, and now it is slipping away. And don't misunderstand Nigel Farage. He is not your buddy on this. The people who want to gut those regulations starts with Nigel Farage. starts with Nigel Farage. I guarantee you that the reason why Nigel Farage wants Brexit is not because he wants healthcare and all this other stuff. It's because he wants to be able to gut that stuff. George Galloway was going for Brexit because he wanted, essentially, Jeremy Corbyn's plan. Jeremy Corbyn's plan, based on what Galloway is saying, is illegal under the European law. At the very least, they wouldn't be able to implement it. So, for him, Brexit was the capacity to implement a plan like that. Do you think Nigel Farage thinks that? Nigel Farage in no way thinks that. Nigel Farage is on the other end of that spectrum, gaming that they can use Brexit in order to gut regulations of the UK. Everybody's playing their sides. Winslow, Johnston and the guy are some of the most famous Tories. Balthazar, Farage loves Brexit so much that he moved to America once it was signed. Farage is very popular with the United States conservatives. Yes, he is, Pat. And I can kind of see why. He has a British accent. He looks like a cartoon character. When you see him in EU Parliament, he's not necessarily horrible, especially when he's talking about Brexit. It's only when he gets to immigrants and everything else that he talks about. Farage is great at making points, while the overarching narrative is not great. Let's say it that way. Meaning, you always have to ask this kind of point of, what is Farage trying to accomplish and what Farage is trying to say? And if Farage is talking about Brexit, great. But Brexit to what end? What does it mean? What does Farage want out of Brexit? And oftentimes, Farage is always cagey about answering that, or he would answer it in a way that doesn't necessarily nail down that, yes, I'm doing this because people like, rich plutocrats want to be able to gut regulations and get rid of business regulations. Yeah, he just want to make money at the expense of Brits. What Jeremy Corbyn is saying here is not crazy in the least. They are trying to profit off of Brexit. Part of the reason that they want Brexit so badly is they want to get rid of the regulations and the policies that the EU has. It's keeping the monsters at bay to some degree. Once you take the shield away, the monsters can play. Farage is one of those people who want the monsters to play. Farage is an alcoholic pub bore. I thought you was going to say pub whore. Pub whore was been funnier. The EU countries can break EU rule card, get away with it in varying extent. Spain did it big time with the grey economy. I see what you mean, because Spain had too much debt on their books, and the EU made this kind of, let's say, fudge in order to get Spain into the EU. I agree with you, but they're not going to do it with Britain. They may do it, let me put a caveat on that. They may do it to a minute degree, but they're not going to do it to a degree where Britain is not going to feel some kind of pain from Brexit, be it a vassal state or be it a complete break and separation in which Britain has to go through emergency procedures. I'm just saying the EU is only going to bend so much, because to them, you're leaving the union and now they're a rules-based union and they just got to follow the rules, etc., etc., etc. It is their negotiating position, that's true, but that negotiating position is still a rather strong one. At least I think so. Spain had massive economy. It was wonderfully cheap. Yeah. I heard the UK government won't allow Farage to meet with President Trump when he visits. That's not true. 2 times. JT often misses the chat thread, but he's getting better. Yeah, I don't see the entire chat thread. I see it in like spurts when I look down. MP Chris Green has just resigned. Another one. The Brexiteers are peeling off. The Brexiteers are peeling off. Oh, wow. That's not good, man. That's not good. Now I know Americans are modern day Nazis. Worker unions are far left. Fuck you idiots. Worker unions are left. And look, from the standpoint of the states, yeah, worker unions are far left. And we don't even have many worker unions at this point. And it depends on the union. If you're talking about the union that was screaming at Shama Shawand because she was trying to get a homeless tax, no, those people have lost their goddamn minds. But in normal circumstances, yes, the unions are good. Yes, that's the point I was trying to make. Who on earth even heard of Chris Green, right? Right, some random guy resigns. Germany is leeching off EU members, but that wealth isn't making Germany working class, immigration policy, and harming the poor. You could make an odd argument for that, right? I mean, ultimately, they've created a European Union, and in that European Union, money, they can't run deficits. As far as I understand, they can't run deficits. And so they have to always contract. Whereas Germany is producing like gangbusters. So essentially, these other countries are taking up Germany's surplus. Yeah, I don't know how you fix that. But they got to fix it. They definitely got to fix it. All right. I am going to end this. This one has gone 40 minutes. Wow, this has gone a lot longer than what I wanted to go. But I wanted you to see both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, and I wanted you to see Theresa May as she was facing down people who were angry at her because they feel like she sold them out. Here's the catch. And this is where the nub meets the nub. Will she be able to get this through Parliament? Meaning when they get that final vote, the mutated platypus of a thing that she's going to drag and drop its corpse onto the body of Parliament, or onto the middle of Parliament, are they going to preside that thing? Yes, this is an acceptable Brexit. That's the question. Look, because if they say no, and if Theresa May is forced to do this kind of, pull the bat shoot, and now they're in this kind of Brexit, full-on, full-throated, no hedge Brexit. What does that mean? What is it going to mean for German businesses? And not just that. Is the European Union going to insist on a border between Northern Ireland and Ireland? And if they do, what? This gets into fascinating politics because Britain is not going to put a border there. So the question becomes, how do they square that circle? And how do they square that circle within a year? Within 2 years, they got little to no progress done. What takes place in the course of this year is going to be magnificently important. So we will see. Lots of lag today. So I'm seeing it in and off. I'm seeing my signal looks okay, but I'm seeing this as being a low output. Wesley, I may have to shut down my system and restart it, see if that helps. But I'm seeing this as being okay. So I'm going to end this. Thanks, guys. I appreciate all of you coming to the show. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the patron. And like I said, I'm going to restart this and hopefully that gets better. Well, the lag gets better. And I'll check the video to make sure the video is not too ridiculous with the lag. Otherwise, I can always upload a copy. All right, guys. Thank you all for joining me. I'll see you shortly. Bye-bye.